Okay, so let's kind of focus in a little bit more on Descartes and Sartre. So Descartes, we're going to look at for duality. Now Descartes showed up, excuse me, in your texts, and Sartre with existentialism was in the text too, but a little bit also in Telepath. So let's look at these guys in turn. So one of the things that Descartes is after, it actually starts as an epistemological claim. Episteme, knowledge. Remember, epistemology was what you call knowledge and all that kind of stuff, right? So Descartes is looking at the senses. And he says, if you ever notice this, everything that you call as knowledge that you get from the senses is debatable, right? Like we've all had instances where we've been tricked by our senses, say no more. So if your senses can go wrong, you can't trust them, right? So what can you trust as truth? Like absolutely certain. So he plays this game in the Meditations on First Philosophy, where he doubts the senses and he doubts all the stuff until he gets down to what is absolutely certain. Absolute certainty. And to him, it's like the only thing that he could be absolutely certain about, if everything in your mind, like imagine this, we've all seen movies like Matrix and Inception and all that kind of stuff, right? So is it possible, he even asked this, is it possible that, I might not have a body? So I'm going to entertain this idea. I don't have a body, right? So here I am, it's Matrix, and I'm like, oh yeah, do I not have a body? Well, I mean, it's possible, isn't it? It's possible that right now you could be dreaming. You could be in the Matrix. Or you could be dead, and this could be your soul, right? Or ghost or something. So is it possible? Yeah, it's possible, right? Especially if, how would you prove to yourself that you have a body? You look in a mirror, you touch it, but those would all be senses, right? Which we already said you can't trust. So fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. No, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So is it possible that I don't have a body? Yes, it is possible. Now, let's entertain the idea that I don't have a mind, right? So what does that look like? So I formulate this idea, do I have a mind? Well, check it out. Every time I doubt whether I have a mind, I need a mind to do the doubting, right? So it's almost like if I say, oh, I don't have a mind, I just proved that I have a mind. So I don't have a mind can never be true. Therefore, what is absolutely certain? The fact that I think. That is absolutely certain. My thinking. Oh, and by the way, therefore, I exist. I am. So Descartes' little slogan is, I think, therefore I am. But that's essentially what it means, is that your reason, your mind is the only certain thing about you, like absolutely certain. The rest of your body, Therefore, he says that within the human person, there's a duality. There's two existing substances. There's mental substance and there's physical substance, right? So in other words, there's mind and body. And these are two totally separate things. The mental, he says, is thought. This is the basic unit of the mental world, and substance is the basic stuff of the physical world. So thoughts exist, minds exist, but they're independent and different from the body, right? There's a duality. They both exist at the same time in completely different ways, which is why it's like, let's say you're going to lift your arm, right? So here you are, and you're about to lift your arm thusly, right? And so it's like, once you lift your arm, there's all this stuff in the brain that's activated, right? And all these like neurochemical things come, and they, act on your ligaments, they act on your muscles. And so then you move your arm and you can measure it, right? If you put your noodle in an MRI, you can actually see the parts of the brain fire up and then you move your arm, right? Okay. But that's all physical, right? The MRI is actually measuring physical stuff that you can measure. But what about the thought? What about the I'm going to move my arm, right? That thing. Well, that you can't measure. You like your mind or your brain, right? You can poke your brain with a stick. Like it's a physical thing. But your mind, you can't, right? So the thought of moving your arm in that regard doesn't really exist. It's not physical. So what happens between the I want to move my arm, which is not physical, to all of a sudden there are nerves firing, which are physical? When does the non-physical become physical, right? In other words, how does the mind operate the body? Anyways, so that's Descartes. How does it fit into all this stuff? Well, because what Descartes is advocating is that, yeah, our brains have all kinds of chemical, and remember how a second ago we were talking about Hobbes, right? And Hobbes said the body is a machine and all that kind of stuff, but we're geared in a certain way. So Descartes is like, yeah, that's true, because understanding the body as machine really helps us with the science of medicine. Like these guys were on the cusp of a lot of cutting edge, for the time, medical knowledge that we have benefited from. However, he doesn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because if we're nothing but machines, then yeah, we're just machines. There's no sense giving us dignity. And what do you do with ethics? And for Descartes, another thing is, what do you do to the human soul, right? Because Sartre, actually, yeah, both of them were Catholic. Sartre and Descartes. Descartes was very Catholic, very religious. And it's like, if you're going to say that we're all machines and there's no soul, well, what the heck then? How are we special by God? And it says in scriptures that God ensouls us, right? So anyway, his fear was you throw all that out with modern science. But anyways, now let's look at Sartre with existentialism. So Sartre said that the human being is nothing. But that's not in a basic training kind of sense of, you're worms, you're nothing. Although I don't think they say that anymore. Come to think of it, I had a friend whose son went in, and evidently basic training is not like I went. Evidently they have to be nice to you now, and you get lattes and stuff. So I think things have changed. But anyway, so when he says nothing, he means you are no thing. So it's a positive outlook. And here's what he's after. So in almost everything, essence precedes existence. All right? What that means is this. Let me switch colors real quick. Let's go with green. So essence is what something is. Literally, it's about whatness. Esse is a verb to be in Latin. Existence means that something is, right? So has physical form. So take a cup. There's my coffee cup, because it's always present. My 10th Mountain coffee cup. Okay, so the idea of the cup is its essence, right, is cupness, right? So in other words, somebody had an idea of, hey, we should make a cup, right? And it should look like this. And they had that idea, and they drew it out on some kind of blueprint, and it went to a factory, and they took, whatever, ceramic stuff, and they made it, and bam. So first came the idea of cup. Its meaning was already in the idea, right? So when they created this coffee mug, it was made to be a coffee mug to hold coffee. It was created as an essence for that purpose. Then, how do I draw this? Shazam! And then it comes into existence, right? Oh, wait, so this was just an idea in someone's mind. And then Shazam, out of the factory comes the cup, and now it is in existence. Essence, idea, existence, physical form. Got it? And this is true of like everything, even trees and living things, right? Because this is where God comes in, because the idea is a tree has an essence in that God had a purpose for these things and created them. If you don't want to go full on God, think of DNA, right? So wait, no, DNA would be over here. So DNA is sort of like, in a way, the idea or the pattern or the essence of something. Because at the end of the day, an acorn is not going to turn into a porcupine when it grows up. An acorn will always be an oak tree. It's like our DNA is our essence in a way. So the same thing, right? When it comes to a person, this is physical stuff. When it comes to people, the old way, so I'm still talking about part one. I'm going to talk about number two in a minute. When it comes to a person, it's like, there's God who carves you on the palm of his hand, and God knows your essence. God ensouls you. And then Shazam, there you are. You come into the world. And so your essence is given to you by God. And when you come into physical existence, you already have your essence inside of you because God created you. Make sense? That is number one. Now, number two is this. If for all things there's first an essence and then a creation, what Sartre says is that's all fine and good for everything in the universe except for human beings. For human beings, it's the exact opposite. Existence precedes. Essence. In other words, what he's arguing is that for human beings, first you exist, then you create your own essence. So that's where the no thing comes in, right? Because my cup is made a thing. It's 100% cup thing. A squirrel is a squirrel. It's 100% squirrel thing. A tree is a tree thing. A human being is no thing. A human being is the result of their own project. So yes, Sartre does deny God. He says there is no God. So take away your God-given essence, right? So God did not carve you in the palm of his hands. He doesn't know how many hairs are on your head. So take that away. And what you got is you are thrown into the world. And your job is to make yourself what you are. That's the deal. And you make what you are by your decisions. However, he says the problem is, so this is like total freedom, like absolute freedom. His deal is nothing impinges on your freedom to decide what you are. What tends to happen, though, he says, is that a lot of people live inauthentically. Because what he says is this, a lot of us, we take our facticity. So here's the deal. Facts about yourself. So your height, your race, your gender, your, where you're from, your social class. Okay, all that kind of stuff. Facts about us. A lot of people take their facts and turn it into an identity, right? And then they live up to this like narrative that they've made about themselves. And that's what he calls to live inauthentically. So you'll hear, I'm from Texas, and you hear this a lot where people say, well, we do this because I'm from Texas. Well, that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, you geographically happen to be born in a place that since 1830 36, since 1836 was called Texas. It wasn't before, and God forbid there'll be a time it won't again. But so this concept of I am an identity that I've decided I am, to Sartre is wrong, because we all have ultimate freedom. So if I were to say, I'm of Irish descent, so if I were to say, oh, I'm drunk, beating my wife, and I'm Irish. That's what we do. We're drunken wife beaters. So no, that's fine. I'm good. No, not at all. But so many people turn their facticity into what they are inauthentically and live a life of bad faith. In other words, it's like they believe the BS they're told about themselves. That's the problem. That's what leads to all sorts of political problems in the world, says Jean-Paul Sartre, who was a advocate of very political radical, really, after World War II, because that's how people get sucked into ideologies, political ideologies. They gather up because they're afraid of freedom, because freedom, right, is actually, if you really think of it, creates a tremendous amount of anxiety, or angst, as these guys call it, the German word for anxiety. And so when you really are faced with your total freedom, where you're naked and alone and you have to make something of yourself, it trips people out. That's why they fall into these inauthentic things, because they would rather have a comforting sense of themselves than deal with the angst of freedom. And so they choose inauthentic lives. But that's up to you. If you want to choose, you can. But at the end of the day, you are just an existing thing, and you have total freedom, 100% freedom, to decide what you want to be. But most people get scared and they accept a package deal about who they are that they get at the mall.